path. I was headed down that way. My parents didn't go to college. They did some community college. My dad is a Vietnam veteran, Marine Corps. My mom and dad, they're Chicanos. They grew up in the 60s. But in the San Gabriel Valley, there weren't many strong, positive role models in the 80s. So, long story short, my mom was fortunate to meet Sal at Luminarias in the restaurant, right? We all know Luminarias. And she, in fact, was just reminding me of the story. She said, hands down, she says, that's it. I'm taking you out of school tomorrow morning. We're going to Belmont High School. And, all the way, La Puente, West Covina, on that other side of town. I said, Belmont, where's Belmont? That's so far. And the next day, it was, what year is that? It was March of 1990. And I met Sal, and my whole entire world changed. He says, you're going to the conference. I was like, conference? What conference? And it was just amazing, amazing. 2 weeks later, I was on the bus, I guess bus 1, be at Roosevelt High School or Garfield High School at 1:15 or 12:15, and that's it. And he was nice enough to have me bring along 2 girlfriends. And so we went, and same thing. I was bautizo, same thing, Chicana. I had no idea that conference would forever change my life. And I was the remedial student. I was the C student, D student. I didn't believe in myself academically. I was very much of just a struggling student. And I was into softball. That was my thing, sports. And I just wanted to play sports and just graduate high school. And I was going to be off to the sheriff's department to do all that. But Sal told me, you need to go to college. And the whole message, the same thing. And so after that, I knew that I wanted to be a high school counselor because my experience was very much the same. My high school counselor, that I wasn't college material, that I didn't have the GPA. Don't worry about the university, UCLA, USC, you'll never get in. So don't worry about it, it's okay. So I was very much patronized that way. But Sal worked his magic, and I was telling my amiga coming here to campus that by the grace of God and the grace of Sal Castro, I got into Fullerton, Cal State Fullerton, did summer bridge, and then after that did a master's at Cal State LA, and I was a high school counselor for 5 years, and now I'm working with transfer students, helping students transfer from the community college to the university. And like Araceli, Sal also is, and Robin, to do the PhD, so I'm also in that as well. So thank you, everybody. Sal, thank you so much. I'm just speechless. I am so honored to be here amongst everyone, and thank you so much tonight. Love you all. Thank you very much.
All right, I want to thank the panel. We did it. We're back on time. All right, and I'd like to invite the next panel to come up now. Armando Duron is coming up. Rita Ledesma is coming forward. Justice Carlos Moreno is here. Very good. And Susan Racho. Now, there are many stories that can be said. One of the stories is that I met Rita way back when. High potential program. I was an undergraduate here, and she was one of the students that we recruited to be part of the high potential program. Late 60s. And Susan Racho. Susan. She was here. Se nos perdió Susan. Well, Susan's going to be the last person to speak, so we'll be able to start with the panelists that we have up here. Susan was a student here at UCLA at the time of the walkouts in 1968, but she has a history as well. She's well acquainted with Sal Castro. She also participated in the Chicano Youth Leadership Conference series as a high school student. And then she came to UCLA, and she was one of the outside agitators in 1968, along with people like, where's Al? Watt is back there. There's another outside agitator here, Luis Ortiz. He's around here somewhere. Where are the outside agitators from the 60s? The college students. The college students, the ones that assisted and helped the high school students to agitate. ¿Quién más? There must be some more here. Right. We're going to start with Armando Duran. Again, please refer to the programs for the bios on the panelists. Oh, here comes Susana. We have Armando Duran here, and I'm very pleased to say that he's part of that effort to make self-help graphics whole again, functioning and serving the community. He's dedicated himself for the last year to make something real from what had failed, and a very important part of our community. So, Armando.
Thank you, Carlos. About a year and a half ago, I got a call from a gentleman named Sal Castro. Now, having been brought up in East Los Angeles in the 60s and having been a Chicano all of these years, I knew who he was, but I had never actually met him. But I was very honored to get the call. And he said, Armando, Justice Carlos Moreno suggested that I call you because he says you can help us with our nonprofit status. We got some problems and so forth, and he said you'd be the person to help us.
I want that high school exam, Carlos.
And of course, I was very, very honored to get the call. And we got together and we were able to do some work and get that cleared up. And then he said, I'd like you to go can you come and be a speaker at the conference? And I said, of course. He said, could you speak on, I know that you're into Chicano art, and you're a collector, and so forth. And I said, of course, I will come. And I went in November of last year to give my little standard talk that I give on Chicano art called Chicano Art in a Non-Chicano World. And it's a slide presentation of my collection. And it's designed to lead students through kind of the story of Chicano art and how that is the story of our people. I didn't know I was going to be affected the way I was affected when I first got up there, because I got up in front of all those kids and I saw myself. I saw myself 35 years earlier, because I had in fact attended the conference. I don't remember meeting Sal back in '71. I mean, I was just one of the kids, you know, and I don't remember meeting him. I don't actually even remember him as such. I remember other people there. I remember the Rodriguez brothers. You know, I remember George and Antonio and Jaime and Javier. I remember those people. Remember the inspirational talk that George, now Jorge Rodriguez, but he was George then, okay, gave, and he was just a few years older than I was, and I remember his talk about our people, about our struggle. And for me, that conference was such a gelling experience because I had a different experience than most Chicanos and most Mexicanos, because I was actually born in El Paso, Texas, so I was a US citizen, but I had grown up, I'd gone to school in Juarez to the 3rd grade. So I had learned Mexican history. I knew that Mexicans were somebody, and we had a history. So coming to Los Angeles, no, I didn't understand why people didn't think anything of themselves. Well, my classmates in elementary school and in junior high, in Riggin Avenue Elementary School, for those of you who know where it is. I grew up in the Maravilla projects, the old projects. And then Griffith Junior High, why they didn't have self-esteem? Because I knew that I was someone. And at the same time, the Mexicanos who did have a cultural background, like some of the speakers in the previous panel said, they were worried they might be deported at any given time, so they didn't have a sense of why struggle, why think about college, why think about my future when it may all be gone tomorrow. But that conference gelled for me that there was something, all the things that I had been thinking about in my own life experience, how they all fit together. It was the beginning of fitting it all together. Why it was that the Japanese students in my junior high, were the privileged students. For those of you who know the story of that particular junior high. Why it was that my 6th grade teacher, was constantly putting us down. How it all fit that my first day in elementary school in Los Angeles, or the third day, we were sent from one class to another, and I asked in Spanish the other 2 kids that were being sent, why were we being sent to another room? And he tells me, because we're stupid, because we don't speak English. It all came together. It all began to gel. College for me was already something that I had been thinking about. It wasn't something that wasn't in my head. But what that conference did was give me a sense of purpose about what college was going to be about for me, what my experience and how college was going to be a stepping stone for me in terms of what I should be doing with my life. Originally, I had wanted to be an architect. That was my little passion. I used to draw buildings and all this stuff. And that's what I thought I was going to be. But as I got to the 11th grade in high school, I realized that wasn't necessarily going to be a socially relevant thing for me to do. That wasn't going to get our people out of the rut that we were in, out of the social crisis that we lived. I couldn't see how that was going to fit. What was going to fit for me was going to be a lawyer. And so even though I was accepted at SC's architecture school, I decided not to do that. I went to Loyola Marymount University, and then came here to UCLA Law School.
Good choice.
But I think that in looking back on last November and looking at those young people and looking at myself, I knew how important the conference had been. The conference is an institution outside of institutions. By necessity, it must be that, and I hope it remains that. To the extent that the conference has to struggle for money and all of the other things that people have to go through to put it on, it's actually been one of its strengths, I believe. It's kept it honest, it's kept it clean, it's kept it true to the vision that Sal had originally. So many other things become so institutionalized and part of a system. Can you imagine if this program had been turned over to LAUSD, for example? What a mess it would be if it had survived at all. So by necessity, it's been out and outside of the institution, and it's been its strength, and it's still true to itself. And when I gave my talk, I was very profoundly moved by the students, not just because they listened, but because in asking questions, the questions were very sophisticated. They're very, very good questions. And I was also moved because the students understood what I was saying and how there are so many aspects to our community. And when I don't always know how things are going to be received, so when I showed a couple of images by gay artists, they understood that and they clapped. When I talked about how there's a gay aspect to our community. There are other aspects to our community that we need to understand within our community so that we encompass everyone. And when you're talking to high school students, you don't always know whether somebody's going to yell in the background, whatever, say something. But they understood it. And it's a testament to the program. It's a testament to the young men and women who participate in it. And I hope that in future years, my children will also have the opportunity to participate in the program. And with that, I want to thank not only Sal, but all of the volunteers who have been volunteering for all of these years. And I hope to be invited back so that I can also start giving back directly to this particular program. Thank you very much.
First of all, I want to thank Garnos and Chicano Studies Resource Center for creating this opportunity for us to have a reunion and creating an opportunity for us to mark history and an opportunity to be reminded that humility and hard work comes first. It comes before anything. And I'm thinking about that because this is a day celebrating Sal, and yet where is Sal? He's in the bushes, back there underneath that tree. He's outside. He's nowhere here in the front with the spotlight shining on him, and yet, the whole universe is revolving around the humility and the dedication and the persistence that he's modeled for us. I think it's also kind of interesting that, I do presentations and conferences and stuff, and usually I'm all, like, I'm not a PowerPoint person, but I have all my type little things, and I'm all well organized. And I kind of came at this like the high school girl I was when I met Sal, and I have like this with my notes in it. When I met Sal, there's a whole piece of biography and narrative that intersects kind of where we are right now. And in 67, 68, I was at Roosevelt High School after 10 years of Catholic school, so I learned how to read and write and diagram sentences, and that has served me well. But when I went to Roosevelt as an 11th grader, within a week of registering, I was classified as a slow, because they categorized us, as rapid, mediums, and slow, and so I was a slow. And I still am not sure, does that mean I had a slow brain? I'm a slow learner, I walk slow, I've never been kind of clear about it, except that the slow clearly identified what courses I could take and what opportunities were available to me. And that certainly is the lesson that we know from Sal, is that what kids need is opportunity. And so the only opportunity available to me at Roosevelt was the opportunity to learn better and more improved and very efficient ways of ditching school. And I did that, and my mom worked in the community, so occasionally, she would be driving down 4th Street, and I'd be standing out there smoking a cigarette, and I would get busted, and I learned many ways of signing my mother's signature. But by the time the walkouts happened, by the time March rolled around, which would have been, my second semester, I already knew that I was done for Roosevelt. I already knew I was going to drop out because there was no way I could ever recuperate a whole year. I didn't know those words. I just knew there was no future. There was no future. But I figured something, I don't even know. I'm 16 years old. What do you think? Nothing. Except I knew I wasn't going to be at Roosevelt any longer. When the walkouts happened, and then a month later when I was able to go to Camp Hess Kramer, I began to get kind of a vision. Not that I would go to school or whatever. I knew I was still going to have to drop out of Roosevelt. There was no choice. But the idea that there might be something different than than going to work for the county. And what was different was the idea that I could go to ELAC. Carlos Montes was there, Olivia Montes. People I was seeing at meetings and events were going to ELAC, and that seemed to be an opportunity. But what happened was a better opportunity, and that was to go to Upward Bound here at UCLA in the summer of '68. And it was an incredible opportunity. I thought Sal was my history teacher because, going to demonstrations after the walkout, going to meetings, going to venues, I started learning things But when I came to here, to that summer, I started learning a lot of things that I didn't know about, like the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo, like the Zoot Suit riots, like Carrie McWilliams, all kinds of things that I didn't know. But in talking to Sal recently, I realized he wasn't my history teacher, although he taught me history. He was the principal kind of Upward Bound. And he knew already that there was no hope for me to go back to UCLA. And he and Luis Ortiz Franco, who Luis valiantly tried to teach me math, which I'm still not very good at, told me about this program that people were starting here at UCLA in the High Potential program. And, you know, the founders are here, the student activists are here. And so I started High Potential with no high school diploma, with Bobby Verdugo. Paula was here, but she was a regular student. You know, she was a regular student, and I started my educational journey, which was long and arduous and difficult. But you know, I did manage at some point. Sal just walked in, and you know, I know you all have these moments, right, with Sal, but it's one of the most special moments is when I see him and he says, "Dr. Ledesma, hi, Dr. Ledesma," and it's like, who are you talking to? You know, who are you talking to? But he's talking to someone that he helped. You know, everyone's talked about how he's believed in people, and one of the things I've been thinking about is, because a lot of my work is, you know, work with children and families and stuff, is I don't know if he studied adolescent development, or I don't know if he studied children, or if he was just smart, or he intuited this, but you know, when you're 16, 17, your identity is forming, kind of the vision of who you're going to be and how you're going to be is forming. And when I was at Roosevelt, I mean, I was a jetter, I was a ditcher, I was someone who could run down the street from Coach Crowder down 4th Street, you know, and escape. I was somebody who knew how to stand in the wings while the Budweiser truck was getting hit for beer for the ditch party. I was probably smart, and I was probably, I probably had brains, but certainly had no clue of any of that. But coming to UCLA that summer, I got now I know it's inspired, now I know it's a vision, but I know what happened that summer is I had the experience that there was a possibility. And that's, I think, the lesson that we need to take from today. I mean, I think Sal would be not happy if we all just walk away from here saying, you know, how fabulous, how touched we are, how fortunate we are, because for every one of us, today there's a kid who ditched at Roosevelt, a girl who ditched from Roosevelt and has no hope of what she's good, has no vision of what's going to happen after June. And there's another one at Garfield, and at every single school there's thousands of kids like this, and there are kids at Cal State, and there are kids here who just don't know how they're gonna, where it's gonna lead to. And so I think we have to take, you know, everyone's talked about this already, but we need to take the legacy, we need to take the lessons that we've learned to be persistent. Why has Sal been successful? Because I was thinking about it, he's kind of been like a one-trick pony. You know, it's like education, 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 education. Believe in yourself, you can, you can, you can. And that's what 16-year-olds and 17-year-olds need. They need somebody to believe in them. And we need to, if we're gonna honor Sal when we walk away from here today, we need to figure out how do we go operationalize that in our daily life, and how do we let the kids that are out there today know that we believe in them and we will work for them. I was thinking also about, in the Indian culture, there's this concept of the 7th generation, and that's this idea that the way you live your life and the decisions that you make today have to be made not in your interests and not in the interests of your children, but in the interests of the 7th generation to come, so that you're completely disconnected from any narcissism or any self-interest. It's what's required to sustain the world and to sustain. And somehow, I think Sal has lived that. You know, it's always been about the generation to come, and I think it's important to think about that. And I also think relationships and circles are important, and I thought of this as I was driving by, that when I was growing up in City Terrace and riding my bike, you know, as a 10-year-old up to Los Angeles State University, or whatever it was called, Los Angeles State College, with no vision of ever going there or being there in any way. Sal was probably there as a student, you know, in the early 60s. He was probably there. And now I'm there, you know, but I'm not there as a student, missing Robin, but I'm there, you know, I'm there as a teacher now. And that's a very nice circle. That's a very nice circle. And so what I hope I can do is I can honor the gift that you've given me and so many others by every day trying to be humble and consistent and hardworking. And if we can do that, then perhaps things will shift a bit. If it's ever been required, it's required today. Thank you.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm Justice Carlos Moreno, and I'm an Associate Justice on the California Supreme Court. And I never used to get that kind of response in court.
Hey, good things come out of Lincoln, man.
I'm very pleased. You know, I mean, Sal Castro is alive and well, as far as I can tell. It sounds like it's a requiem here, so wherever you are, Sal, we know you're alive and still doing lots of wonderful things. And before I get into any detail, I know my good friend Al Juarez mentioned the high school exit exam, in which our court voted on Wednesday, and I really can't get into the substance of that issue because of judicial ethics, because the issue may come back to us or will come back to us by the end of the year. But one thing the LA Times didn't note was that was actually a divided opinion, 4-3, and I was in the minority. I couldn't persuade my other two colleagues to go my way, so.
What was the vote, Carlos?
4-3. So it passed by the slimmest of majorities on our court. But it was a very difficult issue. Al, you're right, Lincoln High School. I went to the first leadership conference, which was then known as the Mexican American Leadership Conference at Camp Hess Kramer in 1965. And Susan Rocha was there, although I don't know if we were at the same conference. But I've, among all the people here, probably have known Sal Castro longer than anyone, and I've got pictures to prove it. I've got a picture here. It's dated either 1957 or 1958, when Sal was still a student at LA State, and he was a playground director at my elementary school and our Little League coach at Solano Avenue. So Sal was good enough to give me this picture a few years back, and it depicts him as a very young man, probably about 25, 24 years old. I'm about 9 years old. So my history with him goes way back, and I know even back then he became a friend of my family growing up there by Dodger Stadium. So it was nice to be able to renew my relationship with him when he was transferred from Belmont to Lincoln in the mid-'60s, I think, and that was owing to rabble-rousing and troublemaking that he was involved with at Belmont, I'm sure. But that time at Lincoln, and I'm talking about the early to the mid-'60s, I think owing really to one teacher there, and maybe Luis Ortiz will agree with me, maybe not, but we had a teacher there named Tom Talley, who I know really encouraged a number of us really to reach beyond the confines of Lincoln Heights and East LA. At that time, besides myself, Luis Ortiz was there. He now is a professor of mathematics at Chapman. Luis Torres, who's a reporter for KNX Radio, was there. Reuben Brooks, who's a federal magistrate judge in San Diego, was there. Paula Crisostomo, of course, was at Lincoln and also under this, the wing of Tom Talley. And someone known to all of you, Moctezuma Esparza, who's in the class of 67, also came under the wing of Tom Talley and later Sal Castro. In seeing how the other presenters have gone forth, I will say just a little bit about my family history, go on to some personal history, and then make some observations about the leadership conference and what I got out of that long ago in 1965. You know, like many of the previous speakers, of course, I'm the child of immigrants, and my parents came over following the Mexican Revolution, that first great wave of recorded migration from Mexico to the United States. And my family on my mother's side settled in Boyle Heights near Soto and Whittier. Later they lived on Euclid. But in 1946, after the war, moved to Dodger Stadium, the Solano Avenue area where I grew up. I was a product of a single mom raised by my mother and her brother, her uncle, and she raised 3 boys and 2 girls. The girls who were older went to Belmont, and all the boys were fortunate enough to go to the Lincoln Academy on North Broadway. I, was always a very motivated student, beginning in about the 10th grade. And I knew then, as early as the 10th grade, owing to this English teacher, and owing to a precedent set by an outstanding student, Javier Reyes, who Luis remembers, and who was the first Lincoln student to go to Harvard in 1963. I mean, I really set my goals very high, and I was lucky enough eventually to get a scholarship into Yale in 1966. But I assure you that I was an atypical student, and the doors really, in my opinion, to the elite universities and even to the elite public universities really didn't open up until the following year, certainly by 1968, when, as Luis and I were discussing, I think UCLA offered 4 EOP scholarships to 4 Lincoln High School students. And the same was done at Roosevelt and in Garfield and so forth. But certainly by the time of 1968, as I've read the history, with the walkouts and with the Vietnam War demonstrations and so forth at UCLA and at Berkeley and really across the country, the schools began to open up. I like telling the story about affirmative action at Yale, which really was conceived in about 1965, 1966. And I was actually part of an experimental class, the class of 1970, where the concept of affirmative action was not so much to admit Latinos or African Americans, but to admit public school students. That was their idea of changing from, and I think Mario knows this, from a ratio of, say, 70% prep school and 30% public school to, in 1964, when George Bush number 43 was admitted, it was about 60-40. When I was admitted, it reversed to 60 public school, 40 prep school. So those times, I mean, here and across the country, I think, show that there was, I think, the early stages of what we now call affirmative action or diversity. So I certainly was a product of that open-mindedness. But what it really meant, and this is, I digress, what it really meant at some of the Ivy League schools was not so much, as I said, minorities and public school students, but it also opened the door to many Jewish students who had for years been facing quotas at the elite schools, quotas at about 12%. My class was 30% Jewish, so the beneficiaries of affirmative action were extended far broader than simply racial minorities. I did not know that I wanted to become a judge. In fact, I think originally I wanted to go into business school, but at some point I decided, meeting people in the law schools, that was something that I wished to do. So I went to law school for 3 years at Stanford. And Luis, I remember seeing you up there at one point. Okay. All right, you were, I was stalking you. And later, after graduating, I worked with the city attorney's office here in Los Angeles, and then for a business firm for about 7 years doing commercial litigation. So after about 11 years of practice, I decided that it would be nice to become a judge. I'd seen judges in the courtroom, and there weren't very many Latino judges, certainly at that time, and there's still not enough. But it's something that I aspired to, and with the assistance of the law firm that I was with the assistance actually of contacts I had developed over the years, including a guy whose name escapes me, but a Lincoln graduate who was in the Duke-Majan administration. I was able to get an appointment to the municipal court in Compton, notwithstanding that the governor was a Republican and I was a Democrat. I served for 7 years on the municipal court in Compton, a community that, if you're not aware, is increasingly Latino. And it was becoming that way as early as even before 1986 when I got appointed there. I later sought an appointment to the Superior Court, which is the court of general jurisdiction for Los Angeles County. And again, I had backing from friends and influential people. And even though I'd never met Governor Pete Wilson, and this is all pre-Prop 187, he elevated me from the municipal court to the Superior Court, again, notwithstanding the fact that I was a Democrat. I served downtown in the criminal courts building for about 4 years. I really felt that I was at home there, since having grown up in 90012. I was here basically in my own neighborhood and picking juries. I was able to come across friends, people I'd gone to school with, and so forth, who asked me to excuse them from jury service, to which I said no. Later, I was encouraged by a friend to apply for a federal appointment, and I did so, and was fortunate enough this time to be appointed by President Bill Clinton, who I later met about a year later at the White House on a tour. And I served there for 4 years, and the opportunity again presented. People say I can't hold a job, but when there was a vacancy on the Supreme Court, which has 7 members, and at that time had 6 Republicans, only 1 Democrat, because after 16 years of Republican governors, all the Democrats had either died off or had retired. There was 1 left, and then he passed away, Stanley Mosk. He had served on the court for 37 years, and I was fortunate enough to get appointed by Governor Gray Davis in October of 2001 to my current position. It's a position I think that some lawyers, but practically all judges would aspire to, and I've had just a wonderful time having what I think is an impact in my own small way on the law of the state. It really is an honor to serve the people of the state of California and to have some impact on how the law is shaped, because what we do here in California really tends to have an impact across the country. I think that given my background, I think there's a lot that I can contribute to the court. Not every case that we decide really will have a basis on one's upbringing. I'm thinking of technical statutes and so forth. But I think when it comes to issues relating to affirmative action or employment discrimination or just basic fairness, I think it's important to have a diverse group of people on the highest court of the state, and I certainly hope that I contribute to that diversity. I want to go back just a little bit about Lincoln High School at the time, because I didn't want to give you the impression that because I mentioned some illustrious names, that I think we were really the exceptions then. And what's sad is that many things have not changed. I go back to Lincoln periodically. In fact, the current principal, I think, is a graduate of Lincoln from the class of '67. And I spoke there, and he said, the graduating class is only 40% of the entering class who come in the 9th grade. So that's a dire situation. And the situation, I think, was pretty much the same when we were there. But I think the point I want to make is that even for the students who are the so-called good students, like me and Luis and some others, that the vision that the counselors and teachers had for us, with this one exception, was that we should go to LA State or East LA or PCC. UCLA, where we are today, was certainly not within the ambit of possibilities for anyone from Lincoln High School. So with that mentality, it was no surprise that many students, even many good students, did not seek to go to a four-year college, much less a university, much less leave California. And I think, in part, not to denigrate the teachers, but I think many of them and their experience was that they had gone to LA State, or as it was known then, and that was really the range of their universe, and they felt, well, if that was good enough for them, it's certainly more than good enough for someone from Lincoln High School. Now, at the leadership conference, I think what it did for me, and I say this in my letter, which is in the program, I sent that to Sal when he was trying to get additional funding from the program from the school district. What it did for me was two things. Remember, this was 1965, when if you even called yourself Mexican American, it was kind of being avant-garde. This was before the term Chicano came around. I mean, it was around, but it didn't have the political strength that it gained. And second, I think that the conference instilled a concept of leadership, and that we should speak up and we should exert whatever political power and influence we have in changing the conditions. Now, I don't recall specific discussions as they did and as are depicted in the movie in 1967, relating to curriculum and faculty and the bathrooms being locked at lunchtime. I don't remember any of that. But what I do remember is that we were encouraged to be leaders and to speak up and to take action. The other thing I want to say about that era is that, coming from a school like Lincoln, which was probably 90 to 95% Mexican, small percentage of Asian, even smaller percentage of blacks. And I've talked about this with other people who've gone to predominantly Latino schools. We didn't know that we were any different than anybody else. I mean, this was our world. So, I never really experienced any overt discrimination. I mean, how could you? Because everyone around you was of the same race. And it really wasn't until I went away. I think, like Sal recounts when he's in the Army and he goes to the South. And then people start treating you differently. You stand out. Now, one of the very humorous, not so humorous episodes I had at Yale was someone called me a spick. I had no idea they were trying to insult me. And I had seen West Side Story, but that was the pejorative term for Puerto Ricans, of course. And I had no idea, what they were trying to say, but in fact, and it was only there where I was one of 3 Chicanos out of 1,000 boys. What's that, 0.3%? That I realized that I was different. Another one of my classmates there was Joaquin Avila, who's later become a really renowned voting rights attorney throughout the Southwest. So it was a very isolating, alienating experience, but I think it really instilled in me the idea that I could really do anything and become anything that I wanted to become. Fortunately, I mean, it didn't defeat me, but I think it did make me stronger in the end. So it's really a tribute to Sal. Oh, if you want to learn more about this development of Chicano consciousness, I read a book about a year ago by Ian Haney Lopez, Racism on Trial, that recounts the LA 13, who were the people who were indicted in the walkouts, including Sal and Moctezuma, and the Biltmore Five. But he talks about the raising of the Chicano consciousness, and I think that those of us who were at the early conferences really were part of that development, where we began to realize that we were in fact different, that we did have the potential to effectuate enormous change in our society, and that I don't know if they used the term sleeping giant then, but they've used that over and over and over again. And now I'm happy to say maybe it's really a reality that we can finally, as a culture and as a group, really take hold of the reins of power. And I hope that I'm a small part of that in my achievements. So thank you.
On behalf of CYLC, we'd like to present Dr. Moreno with this gift. We're sorry we weren't able to give this to you at the premiere of Walkout, but we'd like to give it to you today in appreciation for all your help and support.
That's a Lincoln student, Carlos.
Yeah.
Those are Lincoln colors.
Oh, the artist.
Sal,
Who's a youth?
come up here. Stay together. We're gonna get Sal.
All right. I brought the picture of the Little League and the Knights. You're in the school celebrating.
Sal never goes anywhere without a high school student by his side. And we visited the city council last week where Sal was given a proclamation by the LA City Council. Guess who was there with him? They're students from Garfield, from Lincoln, from Belmont. Right. We have one more presentation, but I wanted to note that Paula is here, back there. And the prerogative of the chair is that you get to speak. Say, you get 2 minutes, Paula. Ven.
As Paula's coming up, I hope that Monica Garcia is still here. Was she with us? Did she leave? The next, is she here? Okay, quickly. I thought I'd bring her up because she's going to be the next board member. We've been huérfanos without a board member at the Board of Education for about 8 months. So now Monica Garcia, who's I know is going to be the next Board of Education member, because everybody's going to go out and vote next week, correct? So she can be the next board member, so we can get more monies for CYLC for sure. And she's out there and we're stalling for time. Hurry up, Monica, please. Wanted to bring her up.
She's gonna make a presentation in a little bit.
Is she really? Okay, is she? Okay, cool. She's gonna make a presentation. No, not me. No, really. Oh, well, anyway, okay, all right. To the conference, I hope. Okay.
Thank you, Carlos, for inviting me up. I'm not supposed to be here. I was supposed to be out of town this weekend. When I told Sal that a couple of weeks ago, when he said, well, I'll see you next Friday at UCLA, right? And I said, well, no, Sal, I'm not going to be there, but I got a really good reason. He said, why, are you planning to die on Thursday? Well, The reason was my son is graduating from college, and that's the best reason to give Sal, but thank you, Elsa, but he procrastinated in getting his stuff in, so there was no cap and gown, et cetera, so I'm really happy to be here with you. So I did come unprepared to speak, but I know I don't need to tell anyone my personal story, especially if you've seen the movie. You've probably know more than I want you to know. But you know, what I went to the conference in 1967 when it was called the Mexican American Youth Leadership Conference, sponsored by the County Human Relations, Los Angeles County Human Relations. And the magic for me was, again, because we lived in such a small world, it brought students from all over the county there. I told Mario yesterday when I spoke to him that I really bonded with this student from Ontario. She might as well have said she was from Mars, because I had no idea where Ontario was at that point in my life. And we became pen pals all the way through college. But what I did bring was my letter of acceptance into the conference. And this wasn't buried anywhere. I knew exactly where it was. It was on top of a pile, but it was on top of the pile. And I've had this since 1967, telling my mother that I was accepted to attend in March 17th in 1967. And that's how much this conference meant to me, meant to everyone here, Myrna and Araceli and Mita and Rob, and so many of us. Of course, since the movie has aired, people are asking me, so did the walkouts change your life? And of course they did, especially in the last year. But what really, really changed my life, and what I think we've done with this conference, is that we've changed the lives of so many. This is what changed my life. And that's why this letter is still, readily available. And I wouldn't not have gone if it were not for Sal Castro, of course. Again, I wasn't prepared, but I got here late while Mario was speaking, and you mentioned the book North from Mexico. That was something else that I owe Mr. Castro. I was one of his service students, which meant I ran errands for him I guess I was in the 9th or 10th grade. And in between, of course, we would talk, and he would pepper me with questions and provoke stuff. And at some point in this conversation throughout the semester, he took me upstairs to the Lincoln Library, and to this day I have the copy of the book North from Mexico by Carrie McWilliams on my shelf. So he told me, read this book, and that continued the conversation. I'm not going to repeat everything else that everyone has said this morning, because it's the same story. We owe him so much, yada, and I'm really, really happy to be here. I am happy that my son is graduating from college. It's just too bad he's not going to wear a cap and gown this weekend. But thank you once again, and this is really well deserved, and it's about time. Thank you, Carlos, for having me. Thank you, everybody.
Susan.
My name is Susan Racho. I'm a filmmaker, documentary producer, writer. First, thanks to Carlos for arranging this terrific reunion. There's people here that I haven't seen in over 30 years. Luis Ortiz, for one. And also, thank you for the opportunity to be here to pay tribute to Sal, who we all know and love. I attended the Hess Kramer conference. It's either 64, 65, I can't really remember. It was such a long time ago. I didn't get a letter. I was recruited out of the teen posts from the South Bay area. I was living in a barrio called La Rana at the time. Just briefly, because I'm going to keep my comments very short, because I'm going to show an excerpt of a documentary that I did that, that features Sal. But a bit of my background, I started UCLA in 1966, was here probably through 1972, which was a very exciting time. Very exciting time. Many in this room were some of the original founding members of UMAS, United Mexican American Students. As I recall, there was maybe around 60-something Chicanos at all of UCLA and in 1966, 67. It was also a time when many of us got involved in helping to organize the walkouts. Given that background, I was, of course, I had the background to put together a documentary about the walkouts, which is called Taking Back the Schools, part of the series Chicano History of the Mexican American Civil Rights Movement. So just to keep my comment short again, because we're running a bit out of time, I'm going to run a short excerpt that features Sal Castro. We may need to move a bit.